Welcome, Web3 media friends, to another Overtime show. Here, brought to you by Rug Radio, and we're focusing today. I don't have my producer today to run the Twitter Spaces, but today we're going to talk about something a bit more personal. Instead of talking about sort of guiding tools for entrepreneurs and creators and artists in the space of Web3, we're talking about parenting in Web3. And it's you're not alone. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. I hear when I'm on Twitter Spaces, those screamy kids in the background. Which, by the way, you really don't hear that much. And I feel like when you're doing it and you're on the conversation, you're like, oh my God, my kid is screaming, and you're saying this most intelligent thing that you've probably thought of all week, a coherent statement, and you're gonna make it to the public, and the kid is screaming. You're like, we don't hear the kid. We hear you, and never be afraid of that moment, because I feel like I've been in that quite often. And so I think that's part of the challenge, is the idea of social contracts. And I think there's not a lot of this talk to be found on the internet and freely available, but they are so important to the conversations that parents are having with each other, certainly young parents. And I think that's part of the discussion is parenting is changing. Parenting is very, very different than what we got. What we got was something apparently, tainted with, frustration and, ripped out of the pages of a script of Mad Men or something, where there was a lot of stress involved and not really, much duty of care, I think, into, what parenting is today, because it's so different. And, these social contracts we have are essentially, they're a standard of interaction, that we have with everyday life, with friends, with work, with family members who we've kind of banned from our own personal life servers. We've given them limited access. We've done that, through adulthood, and we've maintained that balance and developed, a social contract between those people that we're close with. And then, now that we've started our careers and work, now we have like these other new, contracts with work and a standard of excellence. And then here comes this new contract with this entity that is like a drunk friend, it's just like, I'm gonna do what I want to do. You can't do anything. You go ahead and try. Go ahead and try me. And it's just like, there is no rationale with, interacting with this relationship and with this contract. And it really takes up a lot of our time, right? It's very, very, it's the thing that I think, is not being spoken about enough. And that's the drain of time and sort of why we're going to talk today, why Web3 is very interesting for us in that regard, right? The opportunities there are very unique and very different, and also expressive in a time when we have limited time in which to say that really intelligent thing and then go on mute and go rescue them off of, the slide that they were really doing way too dangerous, a thing on. And so, that standard of excellence gets, violated in other ways. So you're really focused in on, trying to develop this relationship with the child, and the things that with friends, the contract with friends. I can't make that Super Bowl party. It's like, that's gonna be weird for like a 2-year-old, or it starts to change the dynamic in ways that can feel very isolating, right? And so, especially with work, right? It's just like, you really, you were probably that superstar. You were the overachiever, and you're the one who, is putting in that extra work and making moves and is seen, in the workplace as very valuable. That's changed, and you don't have that time anymore. And so it's very, very difficult, I think, to rationalize that. And so that's the idea of the violation of a social contract. That's, again, it's so interesting because, we'll talk about this ad nauseum, here in Los Angeles. And I guess maybe it's a bit more of a, peace and love sort of vibe in a sense with children, but it is sort of the literature that's coming out now. And we'll talk about a couple of great authors that are here in Southern California and in New York that are, talking about these conversations and making, what we've done here on the channel, making, vocal the conversations. And so this is, the standard of excellence. I always refer to, think of somebody that has been a superstar, like Justin Timberlake, before he had kids, I mean, this guy was, doing everything. He was doing albums, doing TV. Now that he's had children, when's the last time Justin Timberlake has hosted Saturday Night Live? Right? And so it's very, very challenging. And I think, as you start to examine how others are reacting, it's hard to sort of, gauge, am I okay? Am I doing it right? Because you don't have the privy of these inside conversations because of, things like COVID especially, really isolated young parents from communicating and getting that feedback that you would go and you would get like, at I had one right before and then one during, and it was just like, it's so different where, you would have conversations like at the playground or even at like preschools to kind of touch base. And like you would see like other people melting down and you would have a conversation to help them through and be like, no, you're not alone. I also am losing my wits. And so it's always a challenge to mitigate these social contracts. And I just want you guys to understand that, especially in this space, you're not alone. And the idea of what attracts us to this space, the expression, as well as, let's be honest, like the money, the idea of being able to make money in this quasi-passive way. It's kind of what brought me, into the fold with DeFi, DeFi Summer and even, mining Bitcoin as those who follow the channel know, like, we've done early on. And so, the idea of this quasi-passive income is very attractive. But I think what is being overlooked now is, and I think becoming a bit more apparent, is that we're actually liking the communities that we're getting involved with, in the Discords, are, they're kindred spirits. They're those of us who love tech, who maybe love, working in 3D and late nights after we put the kids to bed, we're playing around with AR or, we're kind of, discovering new music, what have you, working in media that excites us. And so that's what this space offers us to some degree. And so it's finding those communities, because you need to find your tribe. That's the real tough part. When you're breaking these contracts, these social contracts with your friends, with your family, with your work, you start feeling very vulnerable as a human being, and it's sort of a personal journey. But I think that Web3 offers this ability to connect, and I think that more spaces like this need to connect on this level with specific needs for parents and for those with young children, because it's a very interesting part, right, of parenting. I always tell other parents that you can see in their eyes, they're just like, oh God, like this is really so crazy hard. They're probably like year 1 or year 2, and I always advise them. I'm like, look, once they get into preschool, it's going to change your game. There's a light at the end at the end of the tunnel, and it's going to be that, and you're going to have some time back in your day as a parent, because at that point you've probably negotiated with your significant other or not. There's a lot of single parents out there who are navigating this. It blows my mind in terms of like the time management that they have to achieve. But working in sort of their day job, having a kid, and then like trying to, as they nap or when they're asleep or when you can, trying to sneak into Discord and get some alpha or maybe even just talk, because I think that that's the idea of building community in Web3, and especially as a young parent, you want to find your tribe. And so just know that we're out here. This is a small effort in terms of galvanizing. I think that there will be projects, and I think there have been some projects that have gone this route. I thought about doing one. I directed a movie that was very focused on having a baby, and so it was it's something that I'm like, I should probably do something around that. But then at that point, I feel like I'm just fully doxing myself, and I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. It's that social contract, like I'm just like, oh, do I really like sort of merge these two worlds together? Because I have found some solace in Web3, and so the definition of social contracts. You won't be able to Google this. It's so weird, like the dearth of information that I feel like parents have access to are usually preponderantly based upon books or audiobooks or buying something, right? At a certain point, you need to buy something. One of those people that you don't need to necessarily buy something, and I recommend following, is Janet Lansbury. Janet Lansbury is, she's a Southern California mom, former model, and sort of, has just really dedicated herself towards promoting. Again, like I don't want it to seem like to LA or something like this, but she is expressing the conversations that parents are having in the community. And so it's just like when she like drops her articles, I'm like, oh yeah, I just had that conversation, like a couple weeks ago with a parent. She's putting into print the conversations that parents are having with each other as modern parents, because it's changed. It's really, really changed. And I think that she is, you don't have to go and listen to her and read everything and be like, oh yeah, this is how I parent. What she's expressing is, this is what we're talking about of oh hey, like, maybe our kids are a bit more intelligent than we're giving them credit for, and like, they're trying to tell me what's going on, or they're trying to give me attention, or hear me, just don't fix me. These sort of notions that like the relationship is much more complex than we can imagine, or just tips on like realizing that it is a bit more complex than we imagine. And so, because that's the thing, is like they're ever evolving as the children and developing, so you're catching up there, but then so is parenting. This the thing of expected parenting is changing, and it's moving. And I think that, that the idea of making that relationship a bit more healthy is important, not just between, psychologically between you and the child, but for your own sanity, right? It's just like, you're like, oh yeah, I need some time for me. I need to be sane. And that's okay, because you are struggling with, the social contract with your friends socially and with work, and, and it's okay to express. I think that that's really one of the challenges that I faced early on with Web3 as I was developing, with other founders. One founder actually, that I was working with, he kind of put me on blast, on a public, spaces, where it was just like, kind of like, look, because I always advocate here on the channel for people not to do too much free work for founders, because I've seen it obviously in Hollywood ad nauseum, and I see how that can kind of play out in terms of abuse, and it's a real sort of weird scenario where you do want the experience, and maybe that's okay, and that is a good trade-off, but to some degree it's just like, well, yeah, they're getting paid, and the founders are, and they've made some money, they've created ostensibly a company, and they should be able to pay. And so this founder was like, you're just in it for the money. You're one of those money people. I'm like, yeah, I need to feed my family. Like, I'm in between things, and I'm trying to work with you, and I need to, feed them and buy them clothes that, have little puppies dressed up as firefighters on them. That's what I need to do as a modern parent. And so, I think the more that you sort of get involved with the communities, you start to see the opportunities in what you bring to the table, and the multidisciplinariness of this space that we like to talk about. You can find ways of expressing yourself as a storyteller, as an artist, as a musician now with Sound, hello, and ways of getting involved in the space that give you that expressive freedom, but also are bona fide opportunities. But I think you just need to be very forward about why you're there for those opportunities, and they must be monetary to some degree. And so you need that work to pay off. You can do as much, rendering and stuff like that, but at some point you're going to have to tell that project, hey, look, I know I've given you 3, promo videos worth of, excellent, animation. On the next one, would you mind, some sort of collab here where I'm funded, where, I'm paid for my time, because you're worth it at that point. And so, it's a careful two-step. Put in the comment section down below if you're ever, sort of in that weird quandary of when you should ask for money. And if there's anybody in the Discord or the Twitter Spaces that wants to ask a question, please raise your hand, and I'll bring you up, and we can talk more, because I feel like that's what I love about Web3, right? This is what I love about Spaces, is this perspective, is like, the idea that we're all telling the same story as parents in this conversation, but the more perspectives that I get in the conversation, the more fuller it is, the more honest it is and authentic it is. That's why I love Web3. That's why I'm here. So tell stories together. So back to Janet Lansbury, who's one of the authors we're going to be talking about. She is, focused on elevating childcare, and between all the things that we have in the social contracts and our own relationship with the child, that's where her focus is the relationship to the child. And then another author I kind of came across was Nedra Tawwab, and I apologize if I'm stuttering that last bit, Tawwab. I think that's how it's Tawwab. Nedra Tawwab is in New York, and she's a therapist, and she focuses on creating healthy relationships. And I felt like she had an interesting take on, her focus is that she focuses in on the self-talk, on those personal narratives, right? And so, hey, what's up, Tammy? I'm going to bring you up here. And so, those ideas of self-talk are what control the social contract to some degree. And so, I always ask people to look at, when you're talking about the social contract, to externalize that at some point, because there's a lot of self-talk, and that's 90% of the social contract, which you believe that other person expects you to be, and that's like in your head. But when you muster the courage, it feels like, to externalize and express, your thoughts and feelings on a situation, that will help with the social contract. And I think that that's important, even for your own self-talk, to verify. Is that what we're seeing here? Do you think I'm here for the money? No. That founder apologized later. He's like, look, I'm sorry, I totally forgot, you do have kids. And, he was very apologetic afterwards. But it's just like, in the heat of the moment sometimes that, those conversations can get, they're just needed, right? And especially in this space. Tammy's, welcome to the show. Did you have a question? Tammy's is from the San community. I can see she has an awesome shin there.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm sorry.
I can hear you. Welcome.
Okay, sorry. This is super relevant to where I am. I literally just went to ballet with my daughter and have my sons with me. And it's like I can't do spaces. I can't be involved because it's like I'm literally running around all the time and trying to get these things done. And I'm super interested in it. My son just started kindergarten. So just what you said, it's like you see the light at the end of the tunnel, but things just aren't connecting at the same time.
Exactly.
So there's my son in the background.
This is the thing. Don't worry about it, because again, we're really so focused on what you're saying and the value of what you're saying. I get stuck in this moment all the time. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of this thing and they're screaming. I don't hear them. Yeah. I hear you. Just know that.
Yeah, I totally get it. I appreciate you putting this thing on. And, I've been trying to get involved with projects, and it's just been, nearly impossible. And I'm like, how do I even fit into this? I know it's something I want to be involved in. And how do I connect the dots here? So I think I'm trying to figure out, how to do it. And it is a thing. It's like, how can I do things when I know I can't commit solid, hey, I can't do a 9 to 5. And sometimes my son's sick, he has a temperature, and I'm, I have him for the day and certain things. And it's just I'm kind of stuck in this, this place. It's like, what do I do? Where do I go from here? So. Right.
That's the total attraction, I think, to this space as well. And it's what attracted me. And what I found, early on was that I could get involved with the Discord, but I didn't, because we're all over the world. The team is all over the world. It's just I can do something late at night and have maybe a consistent, half hour to where the kids are in bed and I can, kind of log on, right? I can find the time. I can find that time and I can connect at the time that's convenient to me. Now that you set those boundaries, as you establish that level of communication, that's when you start to, develop those conversations in the Discords and the projects that you are attracted to, whether that's, sound because of the music thing, the music angle, what's the value that you can bring to that? You start having those conversations. You're like, well, I've got, a marketing degree. And so I've always, loved music, or I was a singer before. And I'm still looking to do backup vocal stuff, but, my schedule is limited. But, there's talent here. And so to work with. And so I think when you find that time for yourself on a consistent basis, you're able then to sort of, again, connect in ways that was surprising for me. That was the surprise for me. I'm just like, I'm editing and I'm working hard sort of, on the day job, but I take the time to engage with, my communities and I'm finding, that when you're having these conversations, it does take time. And that's the thing. It's not immediate and it does take time. But know that, you are being heard. That's the crazy part. It's just like you are being heard and like, your value is becoming more apparent by each conversation that you're having in the space. And what's great is the space is relatively small. So, those of us in San, like we know each other from Oni or from 10KTF or from like, other projects, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I've been following Crow and Kaku for like over a year now.
Yep.
So, it's just kind of funny that, it's nice to see people remain in the space and not get discouraged. And, and it's hard because, you see projects and they're not where, they should be. And it's like, hey, this stuff is just going to take time. And, it doesn't have mass adoption and people don't know about it. And that's what we're here to do is figure out, well, how do we get it out there? So
100%.
Yeah. And that's one thing I do appreciate about you guys in particular is you haven't been discouraged. You've understood the value of what you're doing and you're focused on the utility and you're doing exactly what you need to do. And it's super inspiring and I love to see it. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate those kind words. And I think that they translate well to, what we're talking about with kids. It's just like, these are the kid with a business. I mean, these are all long-term visions, and sort of, this short-term decision making, sometimes isn't the best for, the business. Sometimes isn't the best for the kid. And so you're just like, right. We're going to get to this, with my, one of my kids, I'm just like, we'll get to the competitive sports. First, we're just going to enjoy the sport. We're going to enjoy the right. Let's just have fun. We'll get to beating, other teams and all these sort of things. But, first let's it's not the most exciting because, we're not feeling competitive or something like that. But I think it's the important step. And I think we're learning what those steps are, in parenting and in this space every day because it's shifting. The things that we, projects used to do, as you said, a year ago are very different. And for the better, it's better that it's changed, right?
Yeah, and people understand, people expect more, and they want alpha, all the time. Where's my alpha? Where's my alpha? They wake up and, where's alpha? Constantly, needing something. So, it's just, and I think now the projects kind of know what people expect, and it's, I'm very interested in this space and I did a lot of stuff in, I guess, Web2. I worked with Netflix for a while doing almost set design, but staging art pieces.
Wow.
And it was, I did that for, I guess I probably did 100 pieces for them and then kind of,
oh my gosh.
Wow. that ended. It was with Selling Sunset. I don't know if you know that show.
Yes.
So, there's copyright issues. So,
and you provide the pieces that go over.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the problem that it wouldn't be stuff that was my stuff. It's they'd send me pieces hey, can you do stuff like this? Mm-hmm. So even though I got credits, it can't really help me going forward unless I get. It's just such a niche type thing. Yeah. So it's tricky to. So. Yeah,
it's just all about that sweet check on that you get for the work in terms of that, right?
Yes and no. They at the end of it, I guess there were so many artists that wanted to do what I did that they just towards the end, because people were just handing them art, they're like, hey, we'll just pay you for materials moving forward. Ooh. And they wanted 40 hours a week, and I have childcare and things to consider. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, this is the worst deal in the world. So yeah, I can't do this. So
That's where that trade-off
not,
is that we're familiar with, working in sort of Web 2 and working, it sounds like in Hollywood together. It's like it can get very like that, when they realize that, oh, there's enough, surplus, or there's enough people in which to get this sort of stuff, then sort of just like, oh, how much money can we save here? And you're just like, oh no.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it just becomes, a race to the bottom, right? And I just didn't want to partake in that. And I do see the value in certain things. I'm like, this isn't, even though it was like, a big name, a big opportunity, I'm like, this is a really terrible deal. I can't do this.
Exactly. We have to move on because our needs are different. Yeah. They're not the needs of somebody who's just coming out of college. And that's, who ends up, especially in this job or in this industry, who ends up taking those positions because they're willing to get that big name on their resume.
Right.
And so
go ahead.
What
would you recommend for, you're kind of saying like, because I'm actually learning a lot from this conversation, like the approach you would take is if you're interested in getting involved in Web3, kind of just putting in Discord, like, hey, what do you guys need? What are you looking for? And just seeing where I would fit in.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy in Web3? We literally can go on to a chat. No, we can go into a chat with the founders. Can you imagine getting on a chat with Ted over at Netflix? Hey, Ted, I've got a question for you, right? It just doesn't happen in Web 2.
Oh, it's what a time we live in,
And so I think that's the opportunity that's here in Web 3 because we are valuable, and those teams, they're building companies. They need these people who have value like yourself, who have this experience. Although, as you say, niche is incredible and very specific work and very valuable and can be applied in many different ways. It's just the imagination of the conversation, of just having that conversation. Be like, oh, I did this. Oh my God, that really translates well to what we need here. We need cover art. We need whatever. It's just, but it's through those conversations, and it's through being present. And so that's always my advice: is to be present in those discords, and don't just talk about floor price, like and these sort of things, right?
I'm not obsessed with it. The way other people are. I know people get really caught up with it. I'm like, you have to see the value in what the team is doing, and I absolutely hate Ticketmaster. I think they're the devil. So I see I think this could be the greatest workaround from what it is, and I don't think people understand hey, what they're doing with basically building the twin souls. You have this opportunity to get airdrops from your favorite artist. You can use these as tickets. It's safe. You don't have to worry about the security of your crypto wallet. I'm like, people have, this is such a big opportunity, and it's if people understood the value of what you could do with this, and I think that right now it's just confusing to people, and if it's broken down in very simple ways, people will get so crazy excited about it.
It's a great point, because that's the limiting factor of getting involved, I think, sometimes with projects. I'm in another project, and they are all MIT big brain, super, super smart people. But to have a conversation about what they're actually doing is very hard. And I'm just like, no, guys, you're changing the way that, narrative can be expressed through multiple, people, and this could be really fun. And they're just like, oh, well, technically, this is the thing we're doing. I'm like, yeah, but what you're actually doing. And it's hard, I think, for everyone to see that, but it's through, again, those conversations that, that you can have, and you can, because that's my value when I go into, that Discord is like, oh, hey guys, what you're actually doing is this. And so let's create a storyline around, how this influences.
Hey, do an infographic that explains it simply. Give visuals. Exactly. Absolutely.
Get visual. Get human. Get sort of down to a level outside of your head. And I think that's the thing is as we're talking about with parent stuff, it's just it's very you're in your head all the time, and you feel like, oh gosh, if I get on this Spaces now, it's probably, and then my kid screams or something happens, I'm gonna feel not so good about it, or I'm not contributing. But you are.
I can't even get on Spaces because I'm the kid. I have to step away and make sure they're taken care of.
If I see a mute on you right now, I know. I'm like, yep, she's got to do something, and she's got to get that kid off the slide. I get it.
Exactly. Oh, that's dead on.
And there's a lot of us, and that's why, I wanted to open up this spaces, and people will listen to the recording here and watch the show on YouTube, and I thank you for your contribution, Tammys. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you doing this, and it's it makes me a lot less nervous about coming forward with things, because I just kind of felt like in a horrible in-between place where I want to be involved and I just felt like I can't. So no, this is super encouraging, and I definitely will do a lot more moving forward. I really like this, so thank you for doing this.
Thank you, and that's sort of the takeaway. Hopefully, is to have the courage to be present and don't be afraid, even though we feel like that we might not be engaging on a quote unquote professional basis. I'm going to say the bar is pretty low for like communication in this space. We get rugged on Twitter like every 2 minutes. It's and the people that are here are from all over the world, and so I think the thing that is king is the ideas, the authenticity, and your passion for the vision. And it's clear that you have it, for a project like San. If you're just in those rooms and you're expressing that, it's going to be very easy to connect with somebody like you.
Wow. God, this was wonderful. I'm like, you have no idea. Like, this is...
I have a little idea because I was there. That's the thing. I have a little idea because I was there. I was, I've been in this space for a while, and it was hard for me because I had my first child, and I started mining Bitcoin, and I started getting involved in the community in this way, and then going into DeFi, and then I was like, oh gosh, like, getting in on the spaces. I was very scared because I was just like, I had a baby screaming literally, right next to me. And so I was just like trying to learn what I could. And so I was listening and listening. And then at a certain point, I was like, guys, they're really doing it in a way that I think could be improved. And I had to speak up. And that's when it changed. That's when it changed the game for me, is when I started to speak up in the spaces, in the Discords, and just being present. And I think that's your value will show if you have the courage to be present in these spaces, and don't be afraid. It's like everyone is so chill, like, relatively chill, and like, we're not like, suits at Netflix, where we're, in the office and we're expecting a certain level of communication. We just want somebody with the best idea and who can help us.
Right. Oh, well, I'm in. I'm 100% taking you up on that. So
amazing. Be present.
Thank you.
And so, talking about, authors like Janet Lansbury and Nedra Tawwab, I think that they are setting the bar for, how the conversation of parenting, modern parenting is shifting on us. And they're kind of, based upon our own perceptions that we give ourselves and those contracts that we have with other people socially. And we control that. We can control that. And I think that that's the great thing, and the great takeaway from this conversation is are those relationships and those perceptions are controllable, A, through how we perceive things, as well as B, externalizing those needs, those wants, those conversations. And as we've been talking with Tammy's, the conversations of value, like how much value. I mean, that's crazy. She worked for one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world, a household name. And the fact that she would be almost sort of afraid to have these conversations in Web3 is exactly what I'm talking about. Is it's really open things, and the conversations that we want to have, especially from the founder side with community, are exactly that. We want to know, what are you passionate about? What is it that you'd love to see from us? What is it that you'd love to help bring us? Are you kidding? And how can we make that work? We've raised just a little bit of money here. How can we make that work? Tammy, did you have a question?
So I'll kind of give a little of, I figure it's a small space. So.
Yeah.
I'll give a little of my background before I did the Netflix thing. I was an entrepreneur. I was involved in, so I started a thing called National Art Society. I was really into trademarks, and I got this thing, and I didn't know how I would use it, but I did grow a community of 125,000 people on Facebook, and then
it's amazing.
Yeah, so I have been able to, and what I would do, it wasn't like a huge thing. All I would do is post a piece of art, post the artist, link it back to them because it helps the artist, And that's it. Like, just post a piece of their art, the date that they made it, if I had that information. And that was it. And that's how I grew it. And so I had experience, like, see, I'm like, it's so, like, specific, what I'm good at. So
that
like,
I mean, that you say specific, but I think, you know, what you're not seeing again is in this conversation, from my perspective, I can see the application of that across a broad array of you know, positioning in business, because you're just like, oh wow, you were able to develop a community around art. Are you kidding me? Hello, we're here on Web3 and this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so you have experience of doing that.
How to connect those, if I can. So I still have that community. I still have that huge following, and, you know, part of me is like, do I sell it? I've had a few smaller offers, and I'm like, you know, that could be the way. You know, I have the trademarks, but I'm like, okay, I own National Art Museum, which I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Like, it's so crazy. So, you know, I didn't really understand it. I just thought, okay, these are just interesting names that people, you know, they're recognizable, they're familiar to people, but they're not really applied to anything. So, and somebody's like, oh, you should just, like, buy a 40,000 square foot building and, you know, build it. I'm like, oh, wonderful.
Just
okay,
build,
great.
yeah. Just build the 40,000 square, yeah.
So, you know, but I was involved in an incubator and had some business background that way. So, you know, I tried to learn as much as I could, and then I ended up, you know, having kids, and everything kind of just got put on the back burner because I was a full-time mom at that point. So, but now that the kids are, like, getting older, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going crazy. I want to get involved, you know.
It's as you said, that light at the end of the tunnel where you suddenly get time back in your day, and you're like, oh, I'm a human again. Okay, what is it that I used to love? Oh, okay, I do love art.
Yeah, I definitely want to get involved again, and I'm just trying to figure out, okay, you know, with what I do, where am I best suited, and how do I do this? So,
and that's the thing, you know, it's like I've seen you in the Discord before, Tammy's, and it's just like, and you know, we probably have like these brief conversations, but it's just like to get into these deeper conversations like this, I've learned so much about you, and I feel like that people who are going to be listening to this, you have helped so many people. This is the crazy part about like this medium, and why I'm in Web3, and why I do these shows, like, you know, across all the different platforms, is because somebody's going to feel so less alone just by hearing you and hearing your story.
Oh, good. And, I have been actively trying to get more women involved in Web3. I, like, give NFTs to people for their birthdays and put them on my Christmas cards and the whole thing. And so I'm very excited about it. I see the use of them. I'm just, trying to do as much as I can to, you know, get more people involved in it. So
as you said, as a woman in the space, what areas or what projects do you gravitate towards in terms of, like, obviously I think of WoW, but like, are there other projects where you're just like, wow, they're focused on things that I'm interested in the space?
So, when I first got involved in Web3, it was all about the art, you know, just like pure art. And then the more I stayed, because I'm like, you know, no matter how good the art is, if there's not utility, like, because I know that men, it's all about utility, and they could have like a crappy piece of art. Let's be fair, you see that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for women, I don't even care as much even about like rarity. I find that I'm trying to care more about rarity, but I just love art. Like, you know, I am super passionate about art.
Clearly.
Yeah,
you're so passionate about it. You were able to get 125,000 people also passionate about it.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, because some people would try to, you know, and this is where I probably went wrong. People would want to pay me to put their stuff up, and I didn't really like it, and I thought it would bring down the quality, so I wouldn't do it. No. So I think times I could monetize it, I didn't, just because I thought it took away from the purity of what I was trying to do, which I'm sure a lot lot of people would look down on, but
no, I think it's so valid. It really is so valid. I've seen friends, TV shows and web shows get destroyed by their involvement with a brand, and it detracts at times, but that's the thing, as the owner.
It's noticeable, especially when you have a high quality that you're trying to maintain, and then you just, oh, here's the advertisement, and it's like, Is that what we're doing?
It's a delicate balance because, you know, at a certain point you do need to understand how to monetize, and I think that's also the exciting part about Web3
absolutely.
is could you monetize based upon, you know, quality, based upon, you know, the fervent, you know, this is why, you know, sort of we developed, you know, Sound, not to harp on it, but it's just like, wow, can we develop and you know, advocate for somebody of super quality and get them and everyone paid in the process? That's insane to me. But it's possible in Web3 if you're creative enough with, you know, the tokenomics and the structure of it. It's all in, you know, up to the imagination, really. That's the limiting factor right now in Web3, and that's what's exciting.
Have you guys heard of House of Kiba, Hawk?
No, but we should look into it. That sounds like.
So this is the one. It's based in Canada. They're a Web3 company that actually they've gone public, and one thing they're doing is they're building mini worlds out of Unreal Engine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like super hyper realistic worlds, and I think the musician 6ix9ine, before he like got incarcerated or whatever, his team purchased one of these pocket dimensions so that they could have concerts in Web3. Yep. Because it's like they were going to do like AR, VR, all of that within this world.
Yep.
And so it was opportunity. It's like a gated community. You put in a password, so instead of like Decentraland or Sandbox, it's like just a super realistic thing that they could have a concert and bring people in. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of an interesting idea, right? So like I could see, like I had a little world. I'm like, I could see Kaku like doing a set there, right? And people like, you know, just an idea of like, okay, here's like another way to have remote concerts, right? Just a consideration. So
100%. And that's the great part of, like, you know, the use of imagination with these tools. And we cover, like, you know, metaverse and 3D and AR on the YouTube channel all the time, and sort of, you know, these tools that we have at our disposal. Literally the only implementation we have moving these days is our own imagination of having the concerts. The team actually is kind of famous, especially Garrick, has done the biggest internet or VR concert in the world. I think they hold the record at the moment, and they did that for January 1st of this year. So in terms of like experience in terms of experience of doing this, we understand like, okay, there's value in this type of thing. Who's it that we need on the team that gives us that value, you know, moving forward? And so, you know, Garrick on the team is you know, massive when it comes to that sort of stuff, and don't not imagine us having something in the metaverse soon, and in a very elevated way. And I think that's what's again great about that space is when you're just having these conversations, it's just like, oh, you did that. Okay, well, why aren't we doing this
amazing.
Now? Right?
No, that is awesome. Yes, that is awesome, because I want to go to more of these, like, and you know, because I'm like, obviously I can't go to, you know, all of these places. So,
yep.
But just, you know, the access that's gonna change people's interest in Web3 when they realize, oh, suddenly I can go to this and I can be a part of it. So.
100%.
Oh God, I didn't know you guys were doing that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm just dropping it. This is not a SAN sanctioned event, but I'm just dropping SAN Alpha all over this place.
Alpha is what you're doing.
And this is the thing, is like I always say, like, the alpha is in the conversations, and it's in these conversations. And, you know, even you know, when I say we're talking about parenting today, it's just like the alpha is in the conversations. I feel like, you know, when I look at sort of, you know, online or at the literature available to us, these are, you know, reproductions of conversations we've been having, like, you know, 2-3 years ago, in a sense. And so the alpha is in the conversations and being present in your community. And so, you know, things like this. Now I'm like, all right, great. You know, when we need this type of thing, we should be talking to Tammy's, because, you know, she is really, you know, well versed in a lot of areas, and like super crazy intelligent. So, you know, having these opportunities to be present, I think is important. And so thank you again for stepping up.
Thanks for doing this. And I think it was a small enough space, and because of, you know, the wrong being parenting, I was like, okay, I can actually put this on with kids in the background and
exactly
say what I need to say.
I'm gonna put that disclaimer on every space I do. Get people out of their shells of that fear. It's important.
No, it's wonderful.
Thank you, Tammy's. And so moving on to Nedra Tawwab, New York-based best-selling author and therapist who talks about how we form our own ideas within our own heads about that self-narrative, and and how we're feeling when it feels like, oh God, should we step into this spaces and expose ourselves, because again we're holding ourselves to a standard that we have in terms of social contracts that is a norm professionally. Like, we know it's, if we're on a Zoom call, we should be trying to keep the kids quiet, this sort of stuff. But here in Web3, again, like, the idea is king, and your authenticity and your passion for the project is king. And so I think, in this space, and certainly in my spaces, any spaces that you guys are in, always feel free to jump in. Hey, what's up, Junior? Junior's like a perfect case. Step on up, Junior, if you're available, because like Junior's one of those perfect cases where you work at home, and you're just trying to figure out like how to get involved in Web3, because you have like these little pockets of time that you can sort of jump into. And I think that those are Junior does one of those really great is a really great example of using those little pockets to jump in and say like, oh hey, I could help with X, I could help with Y. And yeah, one of these days, Junior, I'm gonna have you like up on the show proper and talk about it, because I think that, for me anyways, that took time. I like had to do a lot of listening first, and a lot of like sort of giving myself permission to get involved. But I think when you do, like Junior has for us in Sound Sound, it's just like, you're like, oh my God, this guy's like a genius. Like, how do we use him more? How do we incorporate him into the team? And so finding your own voice in this space. Oh, good. Junior's gonna step up. I'm really excited to talk to him about this. And Junior, you are now up. Welcome, Junior. We're live here on Twitter Spaces as well as on the show on YouTube. Brought to you by Rug Radio. I am named the first video host of Rug Radio, and so this will be on a lot of streams, I guess, Apple and Spotify and all these fun things. But we're a new young show, so thanks for your contribution.
Yeah, thank you for letting me come up. I really appreciate it when you said we got to get more of us out of our shells, because I definitely am shy. Despite having a lot to say, I'm too shy to jump on these spaces oftentimes. And
that's part of the thing again about the parenting aspect to it, and that's why sort of I wanted to start this spaces, because I feel like that for me was a limiting factor. Like, I felt like, oh, the noise and the time. But as I started to be more present, I started to notice they're going to be accommodating to my time. There's I'm going to be like, because I bring value, so I can work around my work schedule, and I'm in post production on 2 films, so I'm editing. Anytime I'm not on a spaces with with the team or working on the project, I'm doing the Web 2 stuff, and so figuring out how to then apply that, it's just about consistency and about being present. And what was it for you, Junior? Because you've been in this space a long time, and I feel like you started to get a bit more active recently. Yeah, what was it that sort of like really turned for you in terms of like your desire to get involved actively?
Oh man, that's such a deep question. It's such a good question too, and I want to acknowledge. Hi, Tammy. I've seen you. I recognize your PFP and your name, and I wasn't following you, so I apologize. I just followed you back. But I super appreciate the topic. This isn't something I get to talk to a lot. I am a stepdad of 3 and a father of 1, so I've raised 4 incredible kids, and it has not been easy.
Never is, friend. Never is.
And as it were, going back to your question, yeah, raising kids is incredibly hard, especially being in web, as some of us have been for so long. And I've been remote since March of 2020. So my dynamic as a father has changed immensely over the last 2 years, because I've been more present. And I know that's like really hard for some of us that like were on the career path that just took us away from home. and yet we had to balance, being a parent. And I've treasured being home like immensely for the last 2.5 years, just because I'm more around, like I can help with breakfast and get them to parent conference, conference meetings, and be there present for soccer practice. And it's just, it's crazy that you can't really talk about this in many spaces, but it's a true dynamic.
Sorry, my phone is ringing off the hook here at the studio. So that's the as you said, like sort of, you're kind of working and you, how do you find time working from home to isolate? Like, do you isolate yourself like in a room and say like, kids don't come in right now in these hours? How do you create that space for yourself?
Yeah, such a good question. So for me personally, it's funny. It's been a musical chairs. As the kiddos get out of the house, my office moves from one room to another room, and I'm now downstairs in the corner living room is my little office. So we have three of our kids are out of the house now. Amazing! I can't even believe the words coming out of my mouth. We're down to one. And so for once, I think that's why my wife wanted me to get out of a room, because she's like, you're stuck in your cave, and you work around the clock. So you just, they also need to see my face more, right? And I'm, like you're saying, always stuck in meetings on Zoom calls or Google Meets or whatever. But yeah, so I'm basically downstairs, more open, more visibility, but it's because we have less kids in the house now. So I'm able to do that.
A little less distraction. So in terms of, getting involved with Web3, what is it that attracted you, and why is it that you're getting involved in such a big way?
Yeah, man, such a great question. So I have what I would refer to as Web2 PTSD. And what I mean by that is, because I went the agency route and I worked on product teams for, I'd say, a good portion of my career, I've been behind NDAs, right? I can't say what I've worked on. I can't show what I've worked on. And there was very little notion of community. And when Web3 happened, and it happened in a time like, during shutdowns, I think so many of us needed to connect, because it's just human nature to want to connect. And so the part of Web3 that I found comfort in was that sense of community. And the smaller the community, the more comfortable I felt. So even a space like this one with only 4 listeners, or 4 of us in the space, is to me is like heartfelt. Like, this is where I feel comfortable because it's small enough.
Yeah, and Tammy echoed that, and I think that's part of building up sort of the courage in terms of doing this, because the stakes are pretty low. When you look at spaces like this, you're like, it's just a couple of people I know, and I feel like I can speak a bit freely to a subject in this space. You're adding value, and I thank you for doing that, because again, it's these spaces, just these 4 people on top of the people that are going to listen to the recording, on top of the people that are going to see the YouTube, etc. They're going to be touched in ways, especially if they're looking at the subject line saying, oh yeah, I'm that. I'm a young parent in Web3. How do I get involved? They want to find answers to these questions because they see the excitement, I think, involved in the space, certainly, and the visions in this space are so inspiring. Like, we're working on something like Son, and some of the projects that I work on. They're very, very inspiring in that, the NFT is going to change the way that we look at certain businesses, and they're going to disrupt not just, the NFT itself, but all the technology that comes with it. And that's why, again, I don't want this to be a Son thing, but it's just like, we're using, zero knowledge proofs and Twin Soul and the technology available on the blockchain to use it as a disruptor to give, a bit more, I don't want to say, power to the artist, but certainly, vault artists in ways that we believe can happen in this space. Artists who are not yet known, but based upon their quality and their passion for what it is they're doing, we can help them. And so that's the challenge, I think, for everybody in Web3, is to have their voice heard, and that first step comes with like, okay, let me try something here. Junior, what was your first moment where you were like, I'm gonna speak out and I'm gonna get involved?
Oh man, honestly, it was in Discord. I think it was in Discord when a couple of us jumped. I can't remember. I think it could have been Oni Force, but maybe it was Kumo X World. I'm a huge Kumo fan. I think Kumo's community is really like down to earth and like super friendly, and like the NFT is like super secondary to it. And it was a time when gas prices were like skyrocketing last year, and like, mental health was like.
Oh, this is a perfect example of the standard of communication. We're getting rugged currently. Poor Junior's being rugged. Oh no, Junior, you're coming in. You're coming in as complete feedback right now, sadly. But this is again the standard of communication. I don't care. I don't care that that I hear static coming out of Junior's speaker at the or voice at the moment, and I can't hear his voice. I'm just waiting to hear his thought. And so that's again the barriers of communication that we face. When dealing with this space, but it's acceptable. Like if it's the screamy kid, if it's the, it's still, this is a perfect example. It's still just feedback, Junior. But hopefully we'll check in back with you. Let us know if you can reconnect. And so, the idea of having, broken communication, like a Spaces, like a Discord, it kind of comes down to the comfortability of how you're feeling about a specific community. And that really opens up, I think, socially your ability to put yourself forward and to have conversations like this, have conversations that are, personal, that are professional, that are vulnerable. And I think that they're important ones to have. And so I encourage you to, find those communities that you do feel safe in. And even if it is just a Twitter Spaces with just a handful of people that you kind of recognize, those are the great moments. We learned so much today, I think, about, the people in these spaces. And I entreat you to mimic this model. And because I think that that's how you get involved. This is how you get involved in a big way in this space and become not just, coming from the speculator and the flipper, but moving into the broader visions that you all see in this space and that we talk about every week here on the channel, is these tools in action, creating visions for disruption that are eliminating barriers and doing so many great things in this space. But again, it's all limited based upon your desire, your imagination, and your ability to make that first step. So make that first step this week, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.